Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and shut the door and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Paul Adam, and we're talking about iOS SwiftUI accessibility. And this is an open source project that's on GitHub. If you go to github.com/CVS Health, then you'll see our public repositories on GitHub, where we also have other open source projects like the Android Compose accessibility techniques that will show you how to build good and bad examples in Android. And then if you're using like older Android Vue programming like Java and XML views, then that repo is there. But the one we're covering today is iOS accessibility, SwiftUI accessibility techniques. That's what I specialize in. I work at CVS Health, but of course, everything I say here is just my opinions. Nothing has been endorsed by them. And I'm going to talk about the open source project on GitHub and then also demonstrate the app um, from my iPhone. And y'all can download this app. So you could either go to github.com/CVS Health and go to the repo and then click on the download iOS app from the App Store. You can do that on your iPhone or your iPad, or you can just go to the App Store on your iPhone or iPad and search for accessibility techniques, and you will find it and just download it there. It is also available for the watch, so you could even download it straight from your watch. And it's coded using SwiftUI, which makes it very easy to code for multiple platforms. So right here, I have the app opened up on the Mac too. So, the same code that runs on the iPhone or the iPad will also run on the Mac. And you might just have a little slight differences in accessibility support, like maybe when you try something with VoiceOver, it might not work exactly as it did on the iPhone. The only major difference is on the watch. Those all have their own code. I did add a watch companion app to this, so if you have a watch, it'll download to your watch automatically. But the watch is a lot more limited in what you can code for accessibility. So it doesn't have the exact same code that the iPad and iPhone and Mac share. And just to let y'all know, I'm happy to take any questions that you have. If you want to interrupt, just shout out your question. Oh, we have a microphone too. We'll bring it to you so you could repeat it for the audience. But yeah, I don't mind if you want to throw me in any certain directions, or you have questions about something you're working on, or you're wondering how to make something accessible. Totally happy to brainstorm that out with y'all here. And so on the GitHub site, you'll see the link to download the app. There's a link to a blog post on LinkedIn that kind of explains the reasoning for this. But CVS Health is just big on open source. It's really nice to be able to share my work with people, and it's all free. And they had the Android one, so I wanted to build iOS, and it has been a lot of fun working on it. And it's starting to get pretty large because I've done it for a few years now. And I ended up sorting it alphabetically. So if you look at the index page, you'll see all the different, what we're calling techniques, accessibility techniques. So the idea of this is to teach you how to apply WCAG to native apps, specifically iOS. And WCAG is organized by success criteria numbers like 4.1.2, name role value. This isn't organized that way. It's more going the plain language approach. Like, what do people call these components? What do developers and designers refer to them as? So this list that you see here is a list of the documentation. So let's say you want to learn how to, meet WCAG's page titles requirement in a native iOS app. So on the web, there is the title element that you put at the top of the page. But on a native iOS app, it's called the dot navigation title property. And so, if you need to kind of explain to a developer how to make their titles accessible in an iOS app, you can send them this documentation link. And this is markdown files. Each one will also list the applicable WCAG success criteria, unless there are none. Like some of the things are not directly required by WCAG, because also go over the more advanced things you can do with Apple's accessibility APIs. For example, accessibility actions, that's not like a WCAG requirement that you implement this, but it is a way to kind of make either like combining focus of multiple elements together, or maybe like a card view. And instead of the user focusing on 5 different buttons in the card, you might just add them to actions. And then with the rotor, they swipe up and down to move between the actions and then activate them. But that's not really a WCAG requirement. It's a way you can meet WCAG. And it might fall under like name role value or something like that. It is keyboard accessible to do actions. And I try to mention those things that, people would wonder, how do you do this with voice control? The way you speak and activate buttons on your iPhone. Also, how would you do it with full keyboard access? And so, like voice control users, they have to say show actions for, and then the name of the button that they want to see the actions for. Okay, so that's the documentation. That's meant to be short and sweet. And again, this is an open source project, so we welcome contributors. And so if you have an idea for a new technique you'd like to add into the project or kind of edit one, then you can do that. And if you just find issues like bugs or ideas for techniques, but you don't want to actually code them, or you don't know how to code, you can create a new issue. And people have had suggestions like improving the navigation of the list of techniques, like adding first letter indexing, or other things that they would like added. Now, the actual code to get this onto your Mac, you just click on code, and you can either, clone it through GitHub, through Git interface, or you can just download the zip, and that will download all the code onto your Mac, and then you can open it up there. I'll show you the project in Xcode. So in Xcode, you have the documentation, which is all in Markdown, and it renders as HTML in GitHub. And then the actual Swift code is in the techniques. So in that folder, and then you'll see the Swift files there. So this is the code that has the good and bad examples. And SwiftUI has previews, which may or may not work. They take a little while to load. But you can also just run this onto your iPhone device, or you can just view it in the preview. Now, this is pretty developer focused, GitHub and Xcode and Swift and Markdown. If you don't really want to worry about that, you can just go straight to the app. Just download the app on your iPhone or iPad and just start playing around with that. And so it's meant to be super simple for anyone to get to through whatever they prefer. And when I'm at work, if someone has a question on how to make like radio buttons accessible, I may, just tell them download this app, or I'll send them the link either to the code on GitHub or the Markdown file, or take some screenshots, or even make a video. So in the app, it's a long list of many techniques. And when I do the search does have suggestions that will be announced. I'm not turning on voiceover right now because it will echo back and forth and sound really bad. So we'll just kind of have to walk through it. But let's say when I type A, it tells me 52 suggestions are shown. So there's 52 techniques that have the letter A. And when I backspace, it says there's 72. So there's 72 technique pages. It's kind of a lot. And alphabetically was the best way I could come up with sorting them. But let's say you want to learn how to do anything, coding these, like I talked about accessibility actions. So let me show you an example here. So like this good example, all the pages have good and bad examples, and they have details accordions that kind of explain the code in a short paragraph. It doesn't show you all the code. You have to go to GitHub to see all the code. But the idea here is that if you make like maybe some sort of swipe gesture action, that's not going to be accessible to VoiceOver or keyboard. So one way you could make it accessible is using accessibility actions. And if I turn on VoiceOver, when I go to it, it'll say your button has shipped, or your order has shipped button, and then it says actions available. And then when I swipe down, up and down on the rotor, it has two actions, which are, well, it has three: mark as read, delete, and activate. So the delete will just delete it, basically like I did the swipe to delete. So that accessibility action can kind of serve as an alternative for those gestures. Alrighty. Now, let me see. Let me pull out my iPad because I think it might be easier to actually see things on it. And if y'all have any questions, definitely just shout them out and I'm happy to answer. Okay. Yeah, and I can just turn the iPad on. I don't know if they can.
VoiceOver on. A11Y techniques. Documentation button.
Okay. But yeah, y'all won't be able to see this. I won't, be sharing it. Let's see. What is a good one? And if y'all download the app or anything and wondering about how to make something accessible, just let me know. I'll do one about the rotor.
Accessibility rotor. Accessibility rotor is used to quickly navigate to
So the rotor with VoiceOver is a way to do quick navigation, like skip through headings and links and other elements. You rotate with two fingers.
Words, speaking rate, containers, headings, vertical navigate heading.
So like headings is there. And then once you rotate the headings, you swipe up or down.
Accessibility rotor, heading. Good example, heading, fruits and veggies, heading level 1.
Now iOS did add heading levels recently. So by default, your page title will be heading with no level. And you have to add extra code to add the levels if you want. But levels do add complexity because then you have to worry about skipping them and all that. So that's how you jump around through headings.
Vertical navigate fruits.
Now, you can create your own custom rotor in your native app if you just want the users to be able to skip around like through recipes or coupons or whatever random data types you have.
Apple.
So now I'm only going to go through fruit.
Orange, banana, pear, banana, or apple, or banana, pear.
And when you get to the bottom, it does a ding because you're at the bottom of that.
Vegetables.
Then you could go through vegetables rotor.
Lettuce, broccoli, green beans.
So that, it's not really a WCAG requirement, but it is a accessibility, usability enhancement that you can add to your app and really make it, work better with VoiceOver users. Yes, question. Try to see if we get the mic working for the questions.
Okay, I have a question. So
Yeah.
did you do any like end user testing with blind folks on some of the techniques that validate what you did?
That's a good question.
Under the process.
Yes, so we have done user testing on some things, and I do have I also use this app as a vehicle to get prototypes to users so they can test them. Because that's also a thing, like if you build a prototype for iPhone, you know, how are you going to get it to the tester? People use Test Flight and all that, but with this, they can just download it on the App Store. And there is a prototype section in the app, and it's not really organized well. It's not really meant to be meaningful for other people, but there's different prototypes that have been built there. And I also use it for testing certain things like, you know, we're trying to build a date of birth picker to test, do users prefer doing their date of birth in one single wheel type input, or do they like it in like multiple types of inputs? We've also tested headings and lists to kind of see, do people like heading levels? Though there's not, if you just look at these prototypes, you won't really understand what they're for unless you kind of dig around. Because I can't remember which one is the headings one, or maybe this is. But yeah, I mean, and users said they were fine. Like if the page had H2s, like if these were H2s, but by default, you can't give the page title a heading level 1. That's what you would do on the web typically. It can only be a heading, but you can give these a level. But you probably wouldn't want to make these H1s, two H1s, that might be weird. So you make them 2s, and then you wonder, is that weird because there's no 1? But the users said that was fine. So, you know, that's some of the sort of testing. And they've tested those date pickers, like all those date picker prototypes that I showed. Those went through user testing to kind of see what they liked. You know, type in your date in like in just one input, or do you want it in 3 different inputs, and then you got to go click through each one. And you can make any of those accessible, and you just wonder what is the best way to do it. And so they have used some of those prototypes for ideas to put into their design system components. And we have like then they decide this is the official way we'll do date pickers now, that sort of thing. Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, and other things like if you ever wonder how do you make a data table accessible on a native app, that's kind of a weird thing because on the web, that's very straightforward. We've been doing it for like 20, 30 years or so. Let me go to the data tables example. Because on the web, we have a table element, we have a caption element to create the title for the table, and we have row and column headers, th, scope equals row or col. We don't have anything like that really on native apps, unless you put a web view inside it. But this project doesn't really talk about web views. We're mostly just talking about native SwiftUI views specifically. So I'll have like good examples of tables, doing different ideas for how to repeat the row and column headers. Because the problem here is like on the bad example, we'll show the problem. Let's say you're a voiceover user. Let me go to the bad example. Oh, that, and it looks really bad on my iPad.
Voiceover on $37.
So you hear
$90.
you're going through a table,
$15, 20 to 30.
and you just touch these random cells. You won't know, you know, what drug is that for, and is that 30-day or 90-day supply of the drug. And on the web, that's very straightforward how you can make that accessible. On iOS, you kind of have to come up with different ideas for what you might want to do, like put it into the hint.
Page 4 of page 2, page 2 of 5. Generic price list, 30-day, $20.
Well, and also you can kind of like reflow the table. So this does do some reflow because often
90-day, $27.
well, you can see here the text is truncated on a very narrow iPhone view. So instead of doing 3-column table here, it reflows the table to basically a list of headings. Like subheadings and then they're underneath them. And that is spoken better and more accessible. I don't know if I'd rotate if I did something different.
Landscape.
No. Sometimes I'll do like different views on the iPad in horizontal versus vertical and all that.
Voiceover off.
For example, I have a responsive views technique, a responsive reflow. Let's see, or responsive layouts. Let me open that one up on my iPhone. So responsive layouts, in the good example, it like you have 3 cards in a 3-column design, and that looks good on an iPad. But on an iPhone, you'd want to reflow it, so you just show 1 card stacked, vertically stacked. And you can detect, your different device types and all that. In the code, we'll explain, how I did that. This is also helpful for me because I'll forget how I even did this, and I can go check. I guess I need to actually look at the code because it didn't say which property. But then, so then in the bad example, well, this bad example also has kind of like the card has a scrolling text container inside it. The cards don't get big. They don't kind of like vertically expand to grow with the dynamic type text size. And then, in the bad example on the iPhone, of course, looks really bad because there's no way you could fit 3 columns of cards on a skinny iPhone display. So, there's lots of examples like that there. And there are other ones like if you want to control the reading order for VoiceOver. So this is a simple example, good and bad. Doesn't look very good in 3 columns there. But let's say in the bad example, when you swipe, you're going, between the columns rather than up and down the columns.
Voiceover of landscape.
So in the
Starter.
bad example here, whoop,
Start business. Enter
now,
2 websites.
once you get into the data, this is kind of like a data table in a way, but we don't have to code this as a data table to make it accessible. We could just control the reading order, like force them to go through column 1, then column 2, then column 3, instead of just going across each row of each column.
Websites.
When you don't hear,
Websites.
you don't know which column you're
100
in.
gigabytes to 100 gig infinity storage.
So you want to control that reading order.
Starter heading details.
That
Standard.
uses,
Reading order example uses dot accessibility element. Children.
it's the property is dot accessibility element and children contain. So when I focus on it and I swipe,
2 websites.
I don't jump around column to column. Now I go down in the proper reading order.
Button. Expanded.
So that, yes, question.
Quick question now.
Voiceover off.
Quick question on that. So, like for annotations on that, would you as a developer expect annotations to be the reading order or the annotations be like grouping them all together and identifying them as children underneath that? I'm just trying to figure out how to pass that along, that information to developers so they know.
Yeah. Well, so with annotations, you could do something generic, like somehow group this as a container, and then, I don't recommend, like for annotations, I don't typically recommend annotating focus order or reading order, except in situations like this, when it's not logical, or you want to definitely control, like you want to tell the developer a specific way to control it. But other things, your basic top to bottom, left to right, I don't see the need to annotate that. But yeah, you could either, I've seen people kind of do groups, and this is like, maybe it's numbered, 1, 2, 3 or whatever. And then you might have notes off to the left that say how you want that order to be. Or you could be more specific and even, you know, do like the accessibility element, children contain code, like kind of put that on your annotation, or just, you know, however you decide that you convey a reading order in your annotations, because everyone does them differently.
Is there another way to group it besides using the children? Would it be confusing to the developers if I just told them to group that?
Well, that's a good question, because there is another way to do it. Oh wait, no, I'm not thinking, grouping controls is for like field set legends. I'm thinking combining focus. The difference with controlling the reading order, we swipe through like 6 different swipe points 6 times. So you don't have to do it that way. You could combine the focus together, and then that would fix the reading order and also reduce the amount of swipes that you do. And a lot of people like that. They want to improve the usability of the swiping for voiceover. So there's a good example. Combining focus. So in that, this was 3 elements combined together.
John Doe, options, button.
But the other reason that this was combined is if I didn't, then I'd hear 3 options buttons, options button, and you wouldn't know which option button goes with what. But
Jane Doe,
by
options,
combining them, it's very specific. And I didn't have to modify the accessibility label of these 3, which that's one technique, kind of like putting ARIA labels on them. Instead, you can group it. This is kind of like a concept we don't really have on web accessibility, this combining focus. And the only way to do it really on the web is like put things inside a focusable element, like shove everything in a link or shove everything in a button. But even then, you might be focusing on the child elements individually sometimes, and you might not like the way that sounds. So you have like more power in a native app, more like full control over the accessibility output, which can be nice, and make things much easier to code too. So yeah, if you wanted to annotate it just as combining focus, the other one was children contain, that just grouped the reading order. But children, accessibility element, children combine actually combines it all into one single element. And that is a real common thing, you know, people add to the apps, and when they do usability testing, they a lot of the user research people see all that swiping that someone does, and they really want to reduce that.
Jane Doe, SwiftUI 11.
Related to that,
Technique charts, but page 2 of 9.
I have some cards examples.
As the first page 2 of 6.
Let me show those, because cards is kind of, you know, where this comes into play a lot. And, you know, there's not really guidance, you know, from WCAG or Apple or anyone how to do cards. How should you do a card? One thing that I know is that if you have a heading on a card, the heading should be the first thing in the card, and it should be coded as a heading. And then the user can skip between all those cards. But then when you do
Sign
that,
up for newsletter, heading.
do you want them to swipe through each individual element too
Get 10%
in the
off,
card?
image. Sign up for our newsletter and get 10%
And
off
then
your first purchase.
this sign up
We'll send you a
button,
coupon code after you enter your.
if you just hear the word sign up button, you might wonder, what am I signing up for? So if you don't combine the focus, let me move this. And this thing, I don't know how to hide that or move that. Maybe I can move it over. Or I need to move my iPhone. Okay, there we go. Because it's just covering voiceover. This is VoiceOver's caption panel. It's one of the reasons I love VoiceOver so much. It shows you the speech output that's VoiceOver speaking. And so you can take screenshots and put it into accessibility bug reports and make videos. And it just makes it much easier to explain accessibility problems to people. But yeah, so instead of just hearing sign up,
Sign up for newsletter
we hear
button.
sign up for newsletter. But now if I did combine this all together, then I wouldn't need to modify that accessible name. So
Page 3 of 6. Get 20%
that's
off
what
with
this
code
one
number
does.
Save on summer go-tos when you choose same-day delivery or free pickup. Beach with umbrella. Shop now. Button. Heading.
The weird part though, if you didn't know, is it said heading at the end. I mean, and that's fine. You just, sometimes when people try to annotate things, they often will try to annotate the screen reader output that they want. And that's kind of a dangerous thing to do. So all screen readers are different. And sometimes the developers will do weird things to try to make it, sound like the designer told them in their annotations. Because they might annotate it and they want the heading to be spoken first up here, but Apple doesn't let it work that way because we combined all the focus together. All the semantics kind of got shoved to the end. And then it just said heading button.
20% off with code SUMMER20. Save on summer go-tos when you choose same-day delivery or free pickup. Beach with umbrella. Shop now. Button. Heading.
Okay, button now, but the good thing is
Tab G.
you still have
Off.
the heading rotor.
Words. Speaking containers. Headings.
So even though it doesn't look like I could touch the heading,
Get 20
I can't touch it directly.
Good card with heading.
I can still
Time
swipe to
good
it.
card with- Get 20% off.
And it'll
with
go
code example.
there
Get 20%
to that
off with
card.
code
So I didn't lose my heading by combining the focus, and that's good because that would make it a lot harder to decide, how to approach that. Now, the other example just had one button in it.
Get 20% off with code SUMMER20. Save
So if you just have one button,
same-day delivery or free pickup.
you can just tap and that should activate the button.
Okay. Button.
You just
Okay.
activate like the
Get
whole
20%
card.
off with code
Basically as one button. It's a button that's also heading the whole card. It's kind of weird. But then you might have other cards that have a lot more buttons inside them or more than one button, like they have two. But this has like an add to your coupons, and it has a show details that'll expand and collapse. It also has a default action that just when you tap it, it opens a view. But we've only focused on it as one thing. So how would we activate all those subcomponents? I can't touch them directly. It only touches them one at a time,
Page
or
3
the
of
whole
4.
card. So,
New. 3
let's see
good
here.
example card with focus combined. New. $3.
So you can use the rotor and go to your actions.
Characters. Actions. Activate.
Activates the default action, and you can swipe between all the different actions.
Add coupon to wallet.
Add the coupon is for this button here.
Show details.
Show details expands the accordion.
New. $3 off. Barber explore image. Activate.
Activate default. That
Card.
just
Back button.
opens a view to open the page. Now, and I'll show you the bad examples.
Detail view. Heading. SwiftUI a bad example. Page 4 of 4.
So bad example.
And off. Bad example card with incorrect heading placement and no dot accessibility label. Heading.
So in this bad example, the heading is below the image. So like you should never have content above a heading. The screen reader user expects content to be below it. And that's stuff we've usability tested before. Like when I worked at Microsoft, I was trying to convince them to rearrange their cards because really folks love to not put the heading first. But we did usability tests and the screen readers were like, well, I expected the things to be after the heading, not in front of the heading. So it's very clear when you have those videos with the users saying and seeing their screen. To me, that's the best way to convince people because you worry, will they listen to the accessibility person more, than they'll listen to the users, and they probably listen to the users a lot more. So those usability studies are really good to help validate like what you think is a good idea and sort of prove it. And then so this button, sign up.
Sign up button.
When you just focus on an individual, you don't know what you're signing up for. That's why it's a bad example. And then the bad combined focus example. So you go through each individual piece.
$3 off. Barbershop image. $3 off any hair. Show details button. Collapsed.
So it's just that
Tap to expand.
with this, you don't know what you're showing details about because it hasn't been combined.
Add button.
And then there's an add button, but you don't know what it's adding. So, and you're swiping through it.
Three dot barbershop. Three
Like,
dot
it's like
Batic new.
1, 2,
dot
3,
barbershop.
4,
dot
5,
button.
6,
Expires
7,
details.
7,
Button.
7
Off.
swipe stops that could have been combined into one. So that's a pretty popular
Voiceover off.
usability enhancement. Let's see. And there's also this is a technology called voice control. Turn voice control on. And voice control shows you can either show the names, show names. Oop. Show name. Oh, there it did. Okay. It shows you the names of the buttons and elements, and then you can say tap show or tap add, and so yeah, it tap the add button, tap OK, and then it taps the buttons based on your voice input. So that there's different accessibility considerations for that, and enhancements you can do, like the combining the focus. When we combine the focus, now it's not showing a name for every little button inside it. It just says new, because that is the first string or first word in this whole string when it's combined. Voice control used to show a longer accessibility name, like it would try to show the full accessibility label or user input label. But then when you wanted to activate something, you kind of had to like say the whole sentence, and that was kind of hard. Most voice control software, like you could either say the whole sentence or you could just say the first bits of it, like Dragon Naturally Speaking, I think. But you know, this is newer on iOS, so they're constantly evolving it every year. They change things, and now they only show the first word. So don't use this to try to do WCAG testing to show accessible names. Like there's a WCAG requirement called label and name that says the button label has to be in the accessible name. You won't see the name because buttons often have longer than just one word as their name. So folks were using that for testing. They can't really do that. There's also another property called user input labels or accessibility input labels. And with those you could supply multiple strings that you think the user would say to activate some controls. And because you might worry, these are like question mark icons. Like if you're a voice control user and you're thinking like, what would I speak to activate a question mark icon? And there's two of them. So what do I say? So you can supply multiple ones. You could say, they could say username help, username icon, because it looks like an icon. Maybe they say that. These are just random guesses. Help for username, I don't know, you know. But they can always just say tap username, tap, yeah. But then you have to, there's two users there's a text field labeled username and a button that has username as the first word. Three. I was supposed to, yeah, okay. So so it tapped it after I said that. Can't actually do that with my finger. But you could also say tap username icon, and it also tapped it. So it's just a way to supply these things. But the only one that Apple will show or voice control will show is the first one on your array of strings. So they'll never see the other ones. And if you have an accessibility label that's different than this, they'll also never see the accessibility label. So it's just impossible to do testing for the WCAG accessibility labels. If you want to be really sure what the accessibility label is of something, you would use VoiceOver. And the VoiceOver accessibility label is help for username. So if you were trying to test for WCAG label and name, you could only use VoiceOver to do that. Or you could use the accessibility inspector on the Mac. Where the heck is that thing? Or it's not loading, or anyway, the accessibility inspector is kind of like a web inspector, and then you can see the different properties, like the accessibility label property, the hint, and the accessibility input labels. You'll see all those properties listed differently, and then you'll know exactly which one is which.
So you have accessibility label, and that's what VoiceOver is gonna announce. The accessibility input labels would be helpful for voice control.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and it's just a usability enhancement by adding those user input labels, not really WCAG requirement. The bare minimum is a good accessibility label. And if all you have is an accessibility label, that's what will display to voice control. It just will only show the first one.
But you're trying to help them take away the guesswork on what that button is called, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, and like for this, showing the names is important. They can do show numbers. Right, show numbers. Is it names? Yeah, the numbers. Okay. The show numbers, and you would just say tap 2. Tap 2. Hopefully that would work. Or well, tap 3. Tap 3 was the details accordion that worked. Let me move this over. Tap 3. Tap 3. So you can either just do it by numbers or show names. Show names. Now, if you notice, like this has an accessibility action, and the icon show numbers. When we see the number, it has this weird little line. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but this details accordion doesn't. That's actually an indicator that it has actions, but it doesn't show that when you just see the name, only when you see the number. So it's kind of weird. So probably should show them both, so the users actually aware their actions. Show names. And if you want, so how does voice control activate the actions? They have to say, show actions for new. And then, so the new card had these actions here, and there's add coupon to wallet, show details, and you just say which one you want to tap. Tap 1. And so it adds it to the wallet there. The other thing you might wonder is, how do you do that with the keyboard? So applying WCAG to native apps, you do have to worry about keyboard, and it's completely different than VoiceOver. It's just that generally, if something is accessible to VoiceOver, it's going to be accessible to full keyboard access too. And also to voice control and switch control. And then the other thing is that the keyboard focus outlines are not controlled by the developer. Like on a website, your CSS can decide the colors of your keyboard focus outline, and often those will fail for low contrast. But in a native iOS app, the user can change this color on their own, but not really you as a developer. So it's one thing you don't really have to worry about. One WCAG requirement, focus visible, you don't really have to worry about in SwiftUI because it will just be visible. But yeah, on the actions, they hit Tab Z. So with the keyboard, I just hit the Tab key and the Z key, and then it pops up the actions. and then I could choose which action I want to activate just using the keyboard. Yes.
So you mentioned that if you do the voiceover first, then keyboard second, it's kind of like the opposite in the web, right? Typically, we do keyboard check first, then we do screen reader testing last. But by developing voiceover, you're actually getting better.
Yes. Yeah, like on the web, it generally, when you want to make something accessible, you kind of think of the keyboard first. Like for something to be accessible to a screen reader, you do have to be able to tab to it typically, like it needs to be a button. And if it is keyboard operable, you know, it'll operate with the screen reader too. It is, yeah, it seems a little backwards in that sense that on SwiftUI at least, if it's accessible to VoiceOver, it will be focusable and also operable with the keyboard. But there are things, you know, that you could mess up. It's just like on Android, it's way worse on Android side. Like you have to do kind of this separate testing. Like I don't necessarily have to test an app with the keyboard on iOS, SwiftUI. If I test it with VoiceOver, I'm like, okay, I know it's keyboard accessible. But on Android, it's not like that. You really have to pull out your keyboard, turn talkback off, and go tabbing around arrow keys and check the contrast, because often talkback focus won't even be visible or have low contrast. But you don't have to worry about that on iOS, so it's pretty nice. I mean, sometimes you'll see weird things that would be bugs, like the tabs on iOS. Let me turn voice control off. Turn voice control off. So these tabs here, this is a native tab view with the tab view style dot page. So it has these pagination dots, and you kind of get those for free once you do that. I can hit the right and left arrow keys and all that here. But it's weird, I don't focus on this thing. I focus on the whole tab view. It's a little strange. And then if I was to like turn this off and do it with VoiceOver, there's a little bug with VoiceOver where I can't swipe to the pagination buttons. I used to be able to in older versions of iOS, and I can't touch them directly. So there, I think I can do the 3-finger scroll. Once you take 3 fingers and scroll left and right, and that pages you through the views. And then it starts to say page 3 of 4, third slide. It didn't tell me that until I started doing that gesture. So I don't really know that I could do that. But that is a bug. It's also weird, like I'll get here eventually, but only when I swipe all the way to the end of the entire page. So if I keep going and then keep going to the end, ooh, and now I'm actually on that pagination button that was way up there. And then I can like move it or activate it. Oop. But it's just not what you'd expect at all. So that's what I call like a platform defect on iOS itself that Apple needs to fix, or sort of a regression defect, because it used to be a problem. Any questions or comments or anything? I'm gonna switch to showing a little bit of the Apple Watch. That's kind of interesting, I think. So there is a companion app for the watch that comes with it when you download the app. And so like not every single accessibility technique is there, but then some of the major ones like combining focus, that's a pretty common thing that you want to do. And so I basically have the same example on the good example here, where it would have been an image, text, and a button as 3 focus stops, but now it's been combined. And I don't I don't, they don't have a caption panel on the watch. There's no voiceover caption panel to see the speech output. So you won't be able to hear it because I've got the volume turned off because of the feedback and all that. But it is combined. Or I could turn the mirror. Well, yeah, if I turn the mirroring off, you'll hear it. Let's see. Oh, my volume's not very loud. I'll turn my volume up. Yeah, I won't mess with that too much because I'll just show you the techniques there. Yeah, so the only difference is I don't have accordions to expand and collapse the details that explain how a technique was coded. There is no accordion control for the watch. On the iPhone, it's called a disclosure group, and it's just an expand collapse. They don't have that on the watch, so you don't have the exact same functionality. So instead, it just opens like a dialogue, just like a page that explains the good example. And then, and the bad example, you swipe, through the image, and then John Doe, and then the options, and then the little image. But I do even have, I think I have touch target size, yeah. Touch target size, that's a WCAG 2.2 requirement that your targets, like your buttons, be at least either 24 by 24 or have like in size or spacing, as in they're 24 pixels away from another button, or the buttons are 24, but they could be like 1 pixel button, 23 pixel space, and you're good, even though that makes no sense. That's just how WCAG's written. But yeah, so there's the good example buttons. These buttons are 24 by 24. These are not. Or maybe that one is, but this is not for sure. But it still passes because of the space. So it could be even smaller because of the space. And then the bad example, these fail because they're not 24 by 24, or they don't have enough space. They are 18 by 18 is their frame size. So yes, question. Yeah, great question. Let's see if I could get Accessibility Inspector to show up, because that is how I recommend that you do it. Where is the accessibility? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question was, how do you test touch target size on an app? Because that is like, you can't just look at it or, take a screenshot and measure it. It's not like contrast. Contrast, you can take a screenshot, put it on your Mac, and get the picker and get in and get the contrast values. But you can't do that with the target size. If you had the Xcode project, you could obviously look at the code, but most testers don't have the source code either. So I do recommend the Accessibility Inspector. Let me see if it's frozen or something. It often is buggy. So we'll see if it'll pop up again. And I think there's some like paid tools there's paid tools that kind of use the same rules as the Inspector, and some kind of write their own rules maybe. But this is a free tool. It comes with Xcode. So let's see here. What I do with the Inspector is select the target, which is my iPhone, and then select the process I want to test, which is the Alley Techniques app. And then this is the inspect button, where once that's enabled, I can like touch things with my finger. So it's like a web inspector. You hit inspect and use your mouse to select what you want to inspect. On Inspector here, you hit inspect on your Mac, then you touch it with your finger. But the problem with just doing that, it doesn't give you the dimensions. That would be kind of nice if it could give you the dimensions just inspecting, because the only way to get it is the auditing, and the audit is pretty buggy and produces lots of false positives. So I don't, often recommend, I mean, I do, it's just kind of confusing for people, but it'll still find things. So like, and I'll show you the other thing that it's problem is that, so it found this division sign and it says that, oh, that doesn't show when I zoom in. Zoom doesn't show on the projector. But this little thing, this fixed suggestion, the question mark icon has a fixed suggestion that says the visible area is too small. Consider increasing both width and height above 44. But WCAG doesn't require 44. WCAG, that was their original requirement, was going to be 44, which I liked because that's a good size for tapping buttons on your phone. Then they went to 24, and that's not really good. They're just much smaller. Like those buttons aren't very big. If you have fat thumbs, fat fingers, it's harder to tap them, especially on a smaller phone. But anyway, so Apple's not really testing for WCAG here. They're testing for their standards. Apple accessibility guidelines, they recommend 44 by 44. Let me just check. Okay, I've still got like 30 minutes or something. And the other thing is that if you remember that the touch target size, a better success criteria name would have been touch target size or spacing. Because I saw maybe it was DQ, they had something that was, they had one rule for touch target size and then one rule for touch target spacing, but they were using the AAA on the size and the AA on the spacing, and it was very confusing to me. But anyway, that's just WCAG called it touch target size, but then they have this or spacing, but the accessibility inspector isn't smart enough to see the space. So it says it fails WCAG. Now, and if I made this 25 by 25 or 24 by 24, it would have passed it, even though Apple is saying, we want you to use 44, but we will still pass if you use 24. They don't really say that anywhere, but that's just how it works that I figured out just by testing it. So yeah, it'll give you false positives, but it's not going to fail things that are for surely that size. It just can't figure out the spacing. So yeah, I still recommend it. It's just, I would still say use this tool to test it. You would just have to, with your eyes, look and say, is there the sufficient space? That would be like part. And at CVS, I do things like write test cases that teach the testers how to test for WCAG success criteria with step-by-step guidance. And I don't know that this is a 2.2. So it hasn't, I don't think it's actually been approved yet to be starting use. Most people are just still doing 2.1. But yeah, I'm recommending our testers use the accessibility inspector, even though that they have to have Xcode, which is not really a guarantee they do. But there's just no other way I could figure out you could do it. Some tool, but not just manual testing doesn't really give you that. There might be some measurement type things. People have done things like they're like, okay, let's pull out the rulers, take screenshots. Like, whoa, that sounds really hard. I would never expect testers to get that right because accessibility is hard enough. You want to make it as easy as possible for sure. Yes, question.
Thing that I've been working on lately that I'm struggling with is drag and drop. A lot of that, I know they have the drop point and then the drag point descriptors or whatever those are. I see you have a row drag and drop. We're working on something more like the screens on iOS where you drag and drop the icon shortcuts.
Okay.
Move those around. So my toughest point is keyboard, get it to work with keyboard. And just overall, just curious if, your recommendation on how to make drag and drop more accessible.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I have a drag and drop example yet. I've had questions kind of like that, and sometimes I start just like really bare bones prototypes to try to like brainstorm ideas, I think I was trying to run something like this through one of the chat GTP things. But the idea, because you often have these lists, I'll show you like a bad example. Because if you're wondering, you might wonder, well, how does Apple do this? You can't always find good example for how Apple will do it because they may be failing it too. Like Apple's not meeting WCAG on everything that they do. But like in the voiceover rotor, the rotor is different items you can navigate by, and you can select ones to include or not, and you can also reorder them with the drag and drop. This is a built-in view, so you would expect this should be accessible, but it's not. So there's no way to do it with voiceover. I mean, maybe they added something. I see actions available. It's just an activate action. I don't see like maybe you might have a voiceover way to make it accessible. Like the rotor might say, move down, move up. Okay. But that still wouldn't meet WCAG because drag and drop has to be accessible for any user, not just voiceover. Like keyboard user has to be able to do it. And there's the pointer gesture success criterion, which is another newer one that basically says like if you have gesture things, or well, there's actually a drag and drop one that says that you need single tap alternatives to any drag and drops. So even if I made this work with voiceover, I need a way to do it just by tap, 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 not any like dragging or swiping, and not any assistive technology either. This is like drag and drop has to be accessible if you don't have any assistive technology. So just single taps. And Apple doesn't have a way to do that. I'm dragging with my finger, dragging up and down. It's a touch, hold, drag gesture. So it's not accessible there. So you'd have to custom build that. And I was just thinking, well, maybe you could do something like you just tap. You could have a mode, like you could have some sort of button that enables the keyboard drag and drop mode, or it could just always work that way where like you just tap it. Okay, I could drag and drop, that's fine. Or I could hit the up and down button. And this prototype doesn't actually work, which is an idea. And maybe one day I'll, make it work. But that is how you could do drag and drop there, just as an idea. Can't remember. I might have something else related to drag and drop in here. I have so many examples, it's hard to remember all the ones I have now. But yeah, do y'all have any other? Oh, maps. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, so maps has is like just like dragging gesture to move the map around. So Apple's doesn't pass that either. And also like the pinch to zoom. To meet WCAG, you can't rely on someone having two fingers and doing pinch gestures. They have to have single tap alternative. So single tap is like a plus minus button, plus minus zoom in, zoom out button. And then you need some sort of alternative for the panning around. So these are just like directional controls. And this isn't like this, none of this is production code. It's just really quick and dirty demos just to explore ideas for how you could make something accessible. And then the bad examples, well, doesn't have that. Oh, and then talk about, oh yeah, do you have a question? Yeah, thank you.
Right, so I'm the UX design and I'm sort of like very new to accessibility. So I was wondering like how can I leverage this? Because I know it's very code heavy, but I think it's really useful to have, especially when talking to developers to develop your design. So like how have you seen examples of UX design using this? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, there's different ways you could do it. Like if you're building a certain type of control, like let's say radio buttons, and the developer gets a design, or they get the design to build the radio buttons, or the designer has that. You could give them this as an example of how you should code the radio buttons. Like you could either give them a link to the Swift file with the source code for this page. You can give them that, or you could give them the markdown. The markdown page is here, and you can find radio buttons. And you could put this on the annotation like as a link. Like I often do this with ARIA. If someone's building a dialogue, I give them a link to the ARIA authoring practices that tells you exactly how to build your dialogue and has a working example. So here I have 2 links you can give them. The documentation, which is your short things that you need to do to make radio buttons, and then the Swift file is the long one that only a developer would really read. Or you could also kind of show screenshots, even with the voiceover speech output on, to say like this is how we want it to look. Like with these radio buttons, with the bad example is that when you touch a radio button, it just says gray button, or like the red one is checked. It just says red button. So we don't hear that it's a radio button, and we don't hear that it's checked or not checked. And also it has a group label called choose color, and we don't hear the group label at all either. And then the good example, when I touch one input in the group, it will speak the group label. Like it says choose color, then it says selected, radio button checked, and it says black too, which is the value. So you could take screenshots or even make a video and kind of show the good and bad, or have a meeting and just kind of walk them through it. But I think like my app's really good for just sources of good and bad examples to kind of show folks either how you should design something for accessibility, because I'll always, it'll have good contrast in all the examples. These examples are also designed to support dark mode. So if you have questions about how you might do things with that, or show different colors for different modes, that's all there. So yeah, I mean, it definitely helps me at work to explain how to do things the right way. Often developers might say, well, I can't do that. That's not even possible to make accessible. I've heard that a million times. That's why I build demos so much. And like, well, here's a demo. I made something. They're usually not pretty because I'm just focused on, the functionality and the accessibility. And then you could add the design later on top of that. But usually accessibility goes design first and functionality later and accessibility last. So yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, and I don't know. I was like, I don't have a specific dark mode. Oh yeah, I do. I got a dark mode technique. Because you can always detect things in a native app that you can't on like the web. So often people will say, let's detect the screen readers on the website. Let's detect those users and give them special things. You can't do that on a website even if you wanted to. You can't detect the keyboard user either. But you really can do that in a native app, even though no one likes that idea due to the privacy implications. Like they don't want you to know I have a disability. They don't want you to throw up a really crappy, bad user experience for the voiceover user because you can't make your main experience accessible. That's always been like the separate but equal, and they're usually never equal approach. So people don't like that idea, but you can detect things like dark mode, text size, voiceover, switch control. I thought I did a thing that accessibility detection. Yeah. Just if you're wondering, like, what could you detect? These are the assistive technologies you can detect that are enabled. Like right now I have closed captions turned on, and I have said that my video can autoplay, and I can have animated images. So those are some of the things you could detect. I don't have a technique on text size. I don't think, or maybe I do. Actually, dynamic type. Let's check. Okay, yeah, I do have a dynamic type. I forgot. So, supporting WCAG resize text. You'll be surprised to see apps that just don't even resize when you resize the text. And like, what in the heck? This is, everybody wants to resize their text. This isn't even a WCAG thing. It's just basic usability for mobile. And just on websites, you kind of get that for free. You can mess it up a little bit, but on an app, it's easier to like block it or mess it up worse. So what you want to do, similar like to the web, you don't want to specify font sizes, like specific numbers, like 12 pixel, 24 pixel. Don't set it that way. You use like your styles. And so Apple kind of has a similar idea. You have a text, a font property, and then a type of font, large title. So instead of saying, I want 24 size text, I just do large title, and that's a style. And then when the user resizes their text, that text will just get bigger and smaller automatically without you having to do much to make that happen or anything. There's also a little thing with text fields. They will usually just truncate where you see the 3-dotted text, like this is the bad example. So this isn't allowed. Like WCAG says the text has to be resizable and visible somehow, and we can't read the rest of that. So you kind of have to allow for it to grow vertically so it doesn't truncate. That on a text field, that's a property, an axis.vertical, and then it lets it expand. I don't see many apps that do that, though. The button, making your button expand vertically, that's really simple. And you should not get that wrong because there's no reason to truncate that when you're just kind of expanding it one more. Oh, and that's the reason that didn't work is because it had a line limit. Line limit, that's something you should avoid using. If you say line limit 1, then it will truncate if the text grows longer than 1 line. Or even 2, then it won't grow further than 2 lines. So just don't use the line limit. Some other things you could do, and let me make the text bigger here. It's like really big, maximum. You can kind of, there's a thing called any layout where you could switch from like a horizontally stacked layout where you have stacks side by side, switch that to a vertically stacked layout where your stacks go up and down. And so in this good example, these links, there's 2 links, they're vertically stacked, but then in the bad example, the links stayed horizontally stacked and then they flowed on the 4 lines, and this actually passes WCAG, that's fine, but it's not very readable. So that's more of a usability enhancement. And if you do something like set a specific font system size 30, this size is 30, and it never grew larger. It just stays fixed at that size. Whereas in this example, it has a large title property, and so it does grow larger. You might wonder, what about the text up here? Why isn't this text bigger? Because that would fail WCAG if it doesn't grow 200%. That's the minimum of WCAG. And Apple has something called the large content viewer, where when you touch your finger, if you have your text size very large, accessibility sizes, and then you touch and hold your finger on something that's small, like in the header and footer areas, then it'll show in the large content viewer this overlay very large. And so even like the back button there did that too. And I have a large content viewer technique to show, this one doesn't look good. But so the question mark, like let's say, so WCAG has text resize. It doesn't say icons have to resize or images, just text. But that's a question that you get. But you can make the icon resize if you like. It's just that you don't have to, but you could also support the large content viewer. And the other thing is you could give it a title. So I just have a question mark icon that I see, but when I show it with large content viewer, I can see the title. It says get help. And then this other one is a location, show my location. And that could correspond with the accessibility label of the button. So VoiceOver users hear that and the large content viewer does. The other thing, this was a recent bad, like good, bad example added because I think it was the CVS app. They had the large content viewer, but when you tapped it, you didn't see how many messages were there. You just like you didn't see the number. So you can show these like we have 9 messages. You can actually show that number in large content viewer. The bad examples, well, they just don't even do it. They don't show in the large content viewer. Oh, is that it? Am I at time? Or what am okay, I got 10 more minutes. Yeah, do y'all have any questions or comments or anything? Feel free to throw them out. Yes, question. Thank you.
That's just more about the test cases, something like how to go about writing these test cases, like covering as many scenarios as possible, and
Sure. I can tell you, I mean, it's all based on WCAG. So let's say touch or pointer gestures. I mean, everything I do goes back to WCAG. So I'm always reading the understanding document. So in our test cases, we have different people writing different ones. Like I do iOS and Robert Hanley does Android, and we had other people did web. So they're not all exactly the same. They don't all match up completely, though people might like that to happen. It's just when different humans are writing them, we're all going to do it a little bit different based on our experience and preferences. For instance, mine, when I got there, I had existing test cases that I edited. I wasn't the original author, so then that makes things a little different too. But one thing I liked was they had like the user story, like at the beginning, it was like, as a user who basically can't perform gestures with your fingers, or you kind of like, you could say as a blind voiceover user, maybe that's your user. And then if the requirement is, you want alt text, you kind of say as this user, I want the alt text. And then we kind of have a section that's like how to meet it in like a short bulleted list. I mean, it always copy the exact WCAG success criteria wording into the test case. Like this is what is legally required. This part, that's called the normative requirement. So everything like above and below that is sort of the informative guidance that kind of explains how you do this, but this is the real thing. And even your definitions, you have to, what does functionality mean? You have to go and read that sometimes, and everyone will debate all that. But for one thing, like for our keyboard users, when we tell them to do testing, we don't tell them to use full keyboard access with a keyboard. So even though it's the WCAG keyboard test case, we don't say pull out your keyboard, your Bluetooth keyboard. We were doing that, and I saw lots of false positives because testing with the keyboard on this isn't just tabbing, it's also like control tab and arrow keys, and you don't just tab to everything like a website. So our testers do have, translating desktop web accessibility testing to native mobile. There's a lot of ways you could get tripped up doing that. And so we like VoiceOver is the required way we test for keyboard operability, even though you might think that seems silly because it's a screen reader. But we do have full keyboard access as an optional method to test for keyboard. But we're trying to say you don't really need to use it because you're just doing double work anyway. Same switch control is optional, voice control, because voice control can also, when the voice control shows a name or a number on an element, that means it's keyboard operable. So you could kind of use voice control to do that, but that also confuses people a lot. Just getting voiceover testing right is hard enough. So we kind of tell them what ATs to use, or what, for contrast testing, I'll say, take the screenshot, put it on your Mac, use the color contrast analyzer, the one from the Paciello group. That's the one that we recommend. But yeah, otherwise, because you just don't know how they would do it. And then if they kind of report false positives or other things that aren't really failures, you can look at the test case and say, did you follow the rules in the test case? And often they might not have done that, or they failed it under, like they said it was a reading order failure or a focus order failure, but it was actually a reading order issue. And they were pulling out like the screen reader to test for keyboard focus, when you only use the keyboard to do that. So it's a pretty complex thing. It's very useful to really like give them the step-by-step guidance on how to do the testing. Like there's a test case for every single WCAG success criterion, and instead of saying, yeah, just go to WCAG and read it, because that would be a disaster. Like everyone's going to do that differently. It's your way to say, like, this is the official way we want you to do your testing. That stuff's not open source or public. It's in Rally is what we use for that. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to be able to have like open source test cases to share with folks. Maybe one day we could do that. Well, yeah, I know, like, I like that project that it gives you all the rules for web accessibility testing, like how to test the different ARIA requirements, and like that's what like Axe would use it as its rules. Yeah, I'm on the mobile accessibility task force at the W3C. I recently joined that. And we're kind of trying to translate WCAG to mobile, but they said we're not really doing techniques yet. Like what I would like to write is success and failure techniques. Like, if you have headings, this is how you pass a heading, this is how you fail a heading. That's what the conformance testing group does. And that's easy to do with web too. Versus like on mobile, you got, well, Android, iOS, and then all different types of Android and things like Flutter and all that. That's why I like just doing SwiftUI. I don't even have a UI kit. Was the old way of doing iOS coding. I could make the same project in UI kit, but it's the old code. No one's really asked me to do that yet at work, at least. So I haven't. But SwiftUI is the new modern way to do things. All right. Any other questions or anything? Let's see what else we got here. Oh, yes, Phil.
Besides that bug you talked about, like was an iOS level bug, any other kinds of
Like
problems?
bugs, platform defect bugs? Sure, I can think of one for videos. So, your videos need your captions, the audio descriptions, but voiceover iOS has a bug, or like the way you show a video, my screen's not sharing. Hold on, let me put that back up. Okay, so this is the video's good example. There's a video here. I guess in maybe dark mode, you don't see the play button. Let me turn dark mode off and check. Or you just see a black box. So one problem is that VoiceOver can't touch that. So when I go to the good example focus and I swipe, it skips over the video. So like I'll never go to that video element when I'm swiping. That's definitely a platform defect. You don't want to be skipping over elements. If I touch it with my finger, it's weird. When I touch it, direct touch, it speaks something. It says Biology 101 video, because I added that, and I added a hint. Double tap to play and show controls. That was an extra hint I added. But we don't see like a focus outline, and I can't swipe to that. So as a way to get around that, I'm saying you need a play button, like an extra play button. Otherwise, VoiceOver will never know there's even a video on the page. I put it in a group. The play button's in a group. I didn't modify the accessibility label. I put it in a group. So then it says Biology 101 video player controls play button. So the group is the player controls group. And the way groups work, kind of like field set legends, you don't hear the group label every single time you go through the input, because I just hear play, mute, play, mute. But if I leave the group and then go back into the group, then I will hear the group label. where it says biology 101 video player controls mute button. But yeah, this video down here, the bad one, I just skip right over it. And now when I touch it, well, no, actually I can't touch it. It was weird. Like I didn't know. I, you know, you can't even touch the bad one at all. The only reason I can is because I added the accessibility label to the video, and that enables voiceover users to hear it when they focus on it. And that, you know, Apple doesn't tell you you have to do that. And that's just something I found through testing. Or maybe that was a platform defect, because at CVS, we track platform defects, they submit them, and then I like review them and validate if they are real platform defects or if it's just like a false positive or not even really a WCAG failure. But this is definitely a WCAG failure. I did follow a feedback assistant bug with Apple. That's how you do bug reports with Apple for their native apps, called Feedback Assistant, and it goes into a void that no one will ever see again. You don't know if or when they'll fix it, but you can hope. But yeah, so you could tap the video, or you could just hit the play button to play and pause it. Of course, your videos need your captions, which yeah, it's got the captions. And then they also need audio descriptions. And then you can select a different audio description track. Like in a video, if you embed the captions and descriptions into the video element, then you use this little button to like turn them on and off.
Move the caption. Player.
I'm not sure in the player itself, possibly in your settings, like your caption settings for iOS. Yeah. But yeah, I'm at time. So thanks a lot for coming, y'all. Appreciate the questions. Let me know if you'll have any more. Feel free to contact me on the web. I'm pauljadam.com, and I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn.